career in workforce development with the state of Kentucky in 2010. That experience ignited a deep passion for manufacturing within me. I started this show hoping to raise more awareness around the bright outlook manufacturing careers have. Join me as I sit down with some of the manufacturing industry's most successful changemakers and learn how they're partnering people with technology. It's time to give people more meaningful work. This is Workforce 4.0.
Hey, you guys, and we are live. Hi, hello, how are you? Thank you guys for tuning in. I'm really excited for this week's episode of Workforce 4.0. We have Corey Adams with Universal Robots on today, and we're excited to learn more about the robots and the cobots. But we're also excited to learn more about Universal Robots' unique focus towards their training and what you guys do with local area communities, as well as some of the programs that you offer through Universal Robots. So, hey, Corey, how are you?
Great. Excited to be here, Ann. Super excited to kind of talk about Universal Robots and workforce development, and appreciate the invite to be on Workforce Wednesdays.
Absolutely. Yes, we are making Workforce Wednesday a thing, y'all. So
if
you guys want to get in on the fun trend, if you want to just find a workforce related post and post it on Wednesdays, we are rocking and rolling with it for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So I know that you've worked for Universal Robots for a while. You've kind of worked your way up through the company. And why don't you tell us just a little bit more about what you do with Universal Robots?
Yeah, so I've been with Universal Robots for just over 3 years now. I started off in the sales organization, as a business development manager, covering, a unique territory, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky at that time. And then during 2020, we really started to see a big impact externally from Universal Robots, which just here, in the United States, when it comes to skilled workers, manufacturing, and, this very large and growing skills gap. And, I kind of took that time, as sales were a little bit slower, and kind of look at, how can we start to impact that change, moving forward. When you look at, a 200+ million skills gap over the next 5 years, that might be something we wanted to start to look at now. And, working with our academy team, really started to kind of open up our eyes internally with, what we should do when it comes to training, workforce development, and education.
Excellent. Yes, I love that. I love that you guys were so proactive and really got ahead of the game by starting early and saying, you know what, this is really, this is a thing, and we need to definitely get ahead of it before it becomes, kind of where you have to be reactive in a lot of situations.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Absolutely. So before we get too far down the workforce development training rabbit hole, I like to start every episode out by just learning a bit more about you personally. And, I love music, like a lot. So, and I did a whole karaoke night with some of our friends in Charlotte, North Carolina, not too long ago. But I wanted to ask you what your favorite song was.
Well, so this is kind of a tough question for me, right? So I have a very large genre of music when you go to my playlist in my Apple Music. I can go from, 50s and 60s talking about, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons. We're talking about the Drifters, Under the Boardwalk. Everybody likes those classics, and then you kind of get into the country, you talk about Reba McEntire, Garth Brooks. So, what really kind of plays close to my heart, and it was something I needed to kind of take a hard look at. But I guess if I'm really being honest, I'm going to kind of go back to my emo days, when it's more of a lifestyle than it is a phase, and kind of lean on, My Chemical Romance's Black Parade. That kind of has a kind of impression on my heart. I kind of got that introduced to that song when I was in the military going through boot camp. And almost every time we were doing something mentally or physically tasking, that, my company commander would put Black Parade on. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I can't think straight. But it was, when you're in those times, that song would come on and you're like, you know what, I can I can make it through this as long as I'm dedicated and I believe in myself. And, even still to this day, when that song comes on, it kind of warps me back to that time when, I was like, man, can I do this? Can I make it through boot camp? And, it just shows that, if you have that dedication, you can pursue that even through emo music. Right. So it's great.
Absolutely. And I am a fellow emo fan and I love that. And that's such a good song. It's a sad song. It's hard. It's one that it's harder for me to listen to. Of course the haters gonna hate. They're gonna be like,
right.
And I'm like, no, it's not. But yeah, that's a hard song for me to listen to. Now, as a parent of a son, it's really hard for me to listen to.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Gosh, because you do think about that time, that time when not only are they on their own, they're on their own, and
Exactly.
you can't be there for them any longer. So I love that. In honor of today and of the emo, I drug out actually one of my old emo necklaces.
Love it. Love it.
15, 20 years ago.
It's great to see it come full circle. It's great to see it coming back.
I love it. I love it. So yeah, great song choice. There we go. Yeah, love it. So let's see here. Before I get too far, and thank you guys for commenting. I appreciate it. I'm going to come back to those in just a second. I want to get kind of at least one in-depth question out of the way before I answer some of these questions or comments. But if you do have any questions for Corey, please feel free to drop those in the comment. I am reading those and I will bring those up and we'll go through those throughout the discussion. But let's go ahead and get this conversation kicked off just a little bit. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure all of us on the LinkedIn Collective, the manufacturing community here, we're pretty familiar with Universal Robots and what you guys are doing. And we know that you guys are doing some really cool things in the cobot space for the manufacturing sector. Mm-hmm. So could you tell me from your own personal perspective how you see cobots in the future of manufacturing, how they interface in the workforce, and how they are already even giving people more meaningful work?
Yeah. So, I'll take a little step back, when you talk about Universal Robots and the development of the cobot, I think, Universal Robots really kind of changed the way that, we look at robotics and automation on the manufacturing floor with the, introduction of the cobot. Universal Robot is very unique with the way that we make it, the easy to use interface, a lot of the built-in safety so it can interact with a human. But it really started to change what manufacturers could do when it comes to automation within a manufacturing facility. And one of the things that we started to see, more of those mundane tasks, like machine tending, like screw driving, like, even welding in some instances, or inspection, processes being more and more automated. Where before it was really more focused on that dull, dirty, and dangerous, tasks that were being done on manufacturing floors. And what I consider is more of that hard automation. I think, collaborative robots bring a unique ability to work hand in hand with an employee, limiting that interaction with that dull, dirty, dangerous, or even mundane tasks that we see on manufacturing floors today. But I think the one thing about cobots is they have an ability to provide an employee better quality of job when we look at what manufacturing will be in the 21st century.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I do think that's the thing, right? You go into some of these industries that are heavily automated and, it's like a wall of just like, cell on cell on cell, mm-hmm. right? And, you've got the curtain there, kind of separating the robot cell from the HMI panel and like that whole thing right there. And the operator goes in there and, runs the machine that way. Right. But it's really hard to get much closer to a big robot like that.
It is. And Universal Robots or the collaborative robot, I mentioned machine tending, right? When we look at what automation is doing, to just individuals' jobs when it's introduced on the manufacturing floor, right? And we believe that, 21st century manufacturing, you may not just have a machinist, or you may just not have a welder, but you're going to have, a robotics welder or robotics machinist, or, robotics screw driving manufacturer, right? Something along those lines where the job duties are required outside of that of just knowing how to use a particular machine, but also kind of understanding automation as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for our audience that maybe isn't as familiar with your product or other robots like cobots, or how, to give them a good visual, I kind of put together a little 15-second clip of a longer clip that you had sent me. I just cut it up and kind of edited it a little bit. Can we play that, and can we show them kind of more or less what you're talking about?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. We'll just play that right here. Yeah, so that's kind of a good synopsis, right? And you've got, at the beginning of the video, you've got your technician, you've got him kind of with this, because I interview a lot, I study human expressions, right? So he looks very puzzled, right? And he's actively, to me, appears like he is working through a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, that was actually an experiment that we had done internally at ECAM, or Eastern Kentucky Advanced Manufacturing, with Kathy Walker in Paintsville, Kentucky. And the whole reason for that experiment was we wanted to better understand what those competencies that an employee may need to feel like, to be more comfortable and successful in that space when automation is introduced. When a manufacturer starts to introduce automation to a factory, a lot of the times it changes the job requirements that operator may need to do on a day-to-day basis. So,
absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but the beautiful part about this is that he's investing a lot of high-powered critical thinking skills there.
Yes.
I mean, it's very obvious. And that's from the very end of the video, and you can kind of see the entire process in that longer clip that you sent me. And I mean, it's obvious with you guys, because you were there too. It's obvious when I'm looking at your all's facial expressions. It's not always easy, right? And sometimes you get tired and everything, but you're going through that critical soft skill. When we think about soft skills for the future workforce, it's like critical thinking is number one in all studies I've read so far. So that's a great example of how he's critically thinking, and then he's applying a hard skill set then by programming. And then essentially you're seeing the robot there at the end doing the repetitive task, right? That humans really don't have time to do, because we're doing the other things like critical thinking and programming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was kind of, like you said, that's the end of a video of what turned out to be a pretty long, a long day for us, walking through this process, because, we believe and think that it's very easy to integrate these products together. But in reality, when it comes time to do that, there's not really a cookie cutter way to say, yep, there we go. And now we have a work cell. So, looking at that experiment, we really wanted to understand the basics that an individual would need to know around automation, outside that of just specific product training, right? Knowing how to use our specific product or anybody's specific product. What other competencies does an individual need to know to feel comfortable? And really the goal that we were trying to get to out of that experiment was to learn how we could develop a very lean but yet effective curriculum that helps the incumbent worker, the current worker we see in manufacturing, perform their jobs and feel more comfortable when a robot or automation is introduced.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we're going to have to kind of embrace that, right? We're going to have to start just saying, here you go. Look at it. It's like in real life. It's right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then we've got to embrace a more expedited way of training. Because like you're saying, I mean, we're just looking at that skills gap, and it's just fastly approaching, and we're like, we're running out. We're kind of short on time here. So,
Yeah.
you're like, what do we do?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And, to that, and I think what Kathy Walker is doing, by the way, is amazing.
Absolutely.
And I'm like in awe of I'm just in awe. Because I've worked in workforce development, I know how hard it is to get a
Mm-hmm.
project like that up and going. I know how much is involved in that, and I'm just like, this woman, she's just taking the bull by the horns. So I can't wait to get up there and see what all they've got, what all they're into.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
it's a very interesting facility, and her take on training was, it's kind of like an aha moment for a lot of people.
Absolutely. Yes. I kind of think so too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say that because I worked with so many of our agency partners that were educational providers, like the Kentucky Technical College.
Yeah.
And no, they do great work. But it is very traditional. I mean, it's a traditional 2-year technical college, and it has to be because it's all state funded. In the way everything is written and passed and so forth and so on. It's very specific in what steps you take and what services you provide and who your customer base is, essentially,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Absolutely.
And it's very unique that she was just kind of like not really affiliated, right?
Right.
And then was like, what we should do? We should build a school.
Right. Exactly.
We should train the people,
Right.
and just do it. And then she did, and now
And
they're
she's
open.
doing it very successfully as well. Absolutely.
Yes, I need that kind of like in my life, that
Yeah.
fire,
Right.
Absolutely. So before I get on to the next question, we will go more in depth in what eCommy is doing in Paintsville. But I wanted to bring up some of these comments. Nikki. Hi, Nikki. She says, happy Wednesday. And she says, hello. Hi, Nikki. Thank you for coming. Jamie popped in to say hi. Mike Unger from Industry 4.0 Club here. He is thanking you for your insights. He says, identifying the competencies for the future of manufacturing is so important. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So when it comes to eCommy, how did you? Am I saying that? Is it eCammy?
eCammy.
eCammy. Thank
As it's
you.
pronounced in Eastern Kentucky. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Sorry. Central and then Eastern.
Central and Eastern.
Western. It's
Very
a
good.
very diverse state, believe it or
Yes,
not.
it
But
is.
yeah. So eCammy. What inspired you guys to really go that route? Like, how did you hear about what they were doing? How did you decide, what, this is a project that we really want to get behind, we want to support, we want to see what's going on over there? What was that thought process like from the company aspect? And how do you think that or like, what do you think the long-term outcomes are of partnering with schools like this?
Yeah, so I think, when you look at eCammy and, I was made aware through eCammy through, Greg Smith, the president of Teradyne, who was very intrigued by, the turning coal miners into machinists. And, and I was asked to kind of make a visit and just kind of see, as an academy standpoint, what are they doing that's so drastically different? And like I said, it was a very eye-opening moment when I first met with Kathy Walker and her team. And she really started to kind of change the way that we want to look at workforce development. Workforce development is not just for the next generation of employees. And, frankly, if it was, we can already see that we're going to have a major shortage in the next 5 years. So we also needed to look at how could we affect the current workforce whose jobs are changing due to the adoption of automation. But there's a third thing there as well, right? I also wanted to look at how could we take, people who are wanting to, go back into the workforce, like veterans, like moms, right? Who are going back into the workforce after raising a family. Where are they supposed to go? So, I guess when we look at this on a more of a long-term plan, I suppose, I hope to see schools and manufacturers kind of collectively start to come together and look at automation competencies, like I said, for that 21st century manufacturing. I'm not a big fan when it comes to like teaching to the test. But in this case, I believe that we really need to start teaching them the basics around automation outside that of specific product training. A quote that has kind of resonated internally, thanks to Greg Smith, that kind of brought it to our attention was, referencing when it comes to workforce development. It's from the former IBM CEO, Ginny Rometty, and she states, we believe these technology we build these technologies, so I think that we have a responsibility to prepare society for these technologies. And I hope that more manufacturers and schools start to, look at what their workforce development programs are and maybe contour them, to be a little bit more of an accelerated program as well. We still need those 2 to 4 year universities, but we also need to currently start to impact the individuals that are also being impacted by automation and give them an accelerated program to be able to feel comfortable when they go to work on a day-to-day basis.
Preach. Yes. What is the because what is the number one fear? What is the kind of the reason that I wanted to start this show and what we're always fighting, railing against, right? With our posts to some effect is, robots are not taking your jobs.
Right.
But however, we know that some of these jobs are, not going to be part of the future of the manufacturing workforce. So if we know that, then we need to figure out a way to expedite the training, especially with your current workforce.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And I think that that's a demographic that's somewhat being forgot about. And it's not necessarily that, robots, especially not collaborative robots, right? Universal robots, we want to have our robots work with humans, not, and not as humans. And, when you look at that stance, we need to do a better job of upskilling that current workforce to understand how this is going to affect their day-to-day job. And instead of just saying, hey, take our product training, no, let's go a little bit deeper and start to look at what are these competencies and how have we changed, your job on a day-to-day basis, and let's teach you how to be successful.
Absolutely. I love that. That's awesome. Like, I wish we could, I'm like, yes, this is the energy we need. Let me pull up a couple of these comments. You guys are rocking the comments section. Thank you so much. I appreciate your engagement, and I want to answer some of these before we move on. Really quickly, Dylan Shanahan says, "Keep up the good work, Corey."
How you doing, Dylan? Actually, I'll congratulate him. He just had a newborn, so congratulations, Dylan, on your new addition.
Congratulations! Send baby pictures. That's what I tell them. Post the pictures. We want to see the baby. Yeah, right. That's awesome. Very cool. Jamie Callahan asks, are you putting lots of effort into working with vision companies giving the robot sight? That's a good question.
That is a great question. So, when we look at, we'll just kind of stick on the workforce development when it comes to automation, robotics, when we look at that, robots play a very small part when it comes to the terms of automation as a whole, right? So when we look at what workforce development is, we are looking for those partners to kind of help fill those gaps, right? A robot is just one tool in an automation specialist tool belt. He needs vision. He needs PLCs, right? He needs safety. There's a lot of things that go into an automation work cell. And that's not something that we can do alone. And that's something that, that takes those partners in manufacturing to kind of look at what they're doing within workforce development and collectively start to come together.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. That's a great answer, and also a great reason for why, when we talk about how the future of workforce 4.0 will be in manufacturing, how it will be more collaborative, right?
Absolutely.
And why it's so important to develop those relationships with your partners.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. So I think we've got time for one last question here
All right.
before our 30 minutes is up. But I do want to ask you, because I name all of my episodes, and this episode of Workforce 4.0 is titled "If We Build It, They Will Come."
Mm-hmm.
How can other private sector businesses get involved in training initiatives with their local educational providers and partners? And do you believe that if we all work together and build the infrastructure, that we will ultimately overcome the manufacturing skills gap?
That's a great question, and I'll try to kind of answer it a little bit in reverse here. So yes, I believe if everyone from the industry sector and the educational market can work together, that we can really start to change the narrative altogether when it comes to the skills gap. I think there's an important need for industry and schools to align on the same objective, and that being, when it comes to training as many people, both current and new to the workforce. I think that we need to look at, the relevant skills needed in that industry with a very accelerated program, kind of like what we mentioned early on. And there's not always a need for that big bulky curriculum for those 2 to 4 year programs, but shortened to the point that will quickly start to upscale that current workforce. Now, there is importance and a need for those 2 to 4 year programs. We still need those engineers, but we also need to look at, like I said, that current workforce and upskilling them to be able to fit within that job market and not feel like their jobs are in jeopardy when it comes to automation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, from if I'm like, we'll say like I'm a, I don't know, like a startup robotics company or, a private sector company partner. And I wanted to get involved with my local community, or I wanted to kind of develop a training program like Universal Robots has done. What do you think some of the first initial steps to that would be?
I think first is kind of looking at what your demographic is around you. As a school, are you heavy automotive? Are you heavy high tech? And kind of looking at what those jobs entail, right? I'll give you an example. When you look at Cleveland, Ohio, very heavy when it comes to machine tending, automotive space. So we want to kind of contour the training in that space, or have a training in that space that contours to that machine tending operator, robotics operator, as automation is introduced.
Absolutely. I love that too. Yeah. That is something that I'm like living in real life. Because, in Bowling Green, Kentucky, it's very like, that's where they make Corvette. And so every company that's a smaller enterprise, right, they kind of feed into that pipeline somewhere. They're either a supplier or they're a customer of Corvette. So then by proxy, it's heavy automotive, right? Now here in Huntsville, we do have a new Toyota Mazda plant. That is fairly new. But traditionally it's always been aerospace. So it's a completely different market, right? Different. It's space, aerospace, Department of Defense, that kind of stuff. And it's a very different market than automotive. I mean, they share some similarities and they share some technical alignments, if that makes sense, but
it does.
It would still be a different skill set.
It would, and for the individuals on the floor, on the manufacturing floor as operators or as technicians, right? There will be some similarities, but there's going to be some major differences as well, outside of just the specific product that they're learning, but the tasks that they'll be asked to do on a day-to-day basis as well.
Awesome. Well, before we close out for the day, I do want to get to Dale's question. It's a good question as well. It kind of focuses more on the safety aspect, but a lot of folks are worried about the integrated safety. Are you seeing it as a difficult task?
Yes. So when we look at integrated safety, and great question, Dale, safety can be very tricky when it comes to, risk assessments, it being already integrated into a system. Safety can also be determined by your safety coordinator on the shop floor. And I think the first place that we really look at when it comes to integrated safety is, what do you feel as the manufacturer of the manager of that floor? How does that impact your your employees? Do you need to add additional safety? So I think that's kind of something that you want to take a step-by-step guide at. When it comes to workforce development, it's not something that's really on the forefront for us. We understand the importance of looking at safety and risk assessments, but we're looking at trying to kind of make a bigger impact when it comes to looking at those machine tending operators, those welding operators, those screw driving operators, and touch on safety very briefly. But it is something that I can tell you is on the roadmap for us when we look at how can we integrate more of a traditional automation curriculum into a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. I love that. I think that's a really good question to end with. For those that are out there that maybe want to learn more about Universal Robots, or they want to just connect with you because they're like, that Corey, now he's a cool guy. I need to connect with them. Can you share with us what's the best way to reach you, contact you, connect with you?
Yeah, so you're more than welcome to find me on LinkedIn. Please, any questions outside of this forum, you can feel free to contact me via email. It's coad@universal-robots.com. And I'd love to hear from anybody within the organization, within education, to kind of get your thoughts and feedback. I think that this is a very large and growing community, and it takes all of us to kind of coordinate together to really kind of determine a path forward.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Corey. I appreciate it. If you tuned in today and joined us, and for everybody that commented today, thank you so much. We are running a little past time, but thank you guys so much for coming, and we will see you next week for another amazing episode of Workforce 4.0. Corey, thank you so much. I really
Thanks,
appreciate
man, for having me, and excited to see what's next week.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You guys have a great Workforce Wednesday and a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Enjoy.
Bye.